Hey, I'm here with Tiger Lily. Maybe she'll say hi in a minute. Do we want the light? I don't know. Thanks for coming to this channel, y'all. I felt like it'd be good to finish, reading the love languages, and then I was like, you know what? Let me introduce you to something else, and we'll get back to the love languages in a moment next time. But there's just so many amazing books out there. And something I love, you want to say hi, Kit Kat, to everyone? One of my favorite techniques of all time for body awareness is called the Alexander technique. And I feel like that really influences how I teach Qigong because it's so fun and it's really helped me to absorb the philosophies of Qigong, especially actually the meridian exercises by Shizuto Masunaga, who said, follow the kyo, do what's easy, not the jitsu, not the stuff that's really hard and stressful. Like if you have one side that hurts more than the other, that's called the jitsu side. And then the easier side is the kyo. So in massage therapy, we learned, and when we trained in massage therapy, that if, for example, someone's right shoulder is really bothering them, then you do the left shoulder first. Because it's the same philosophy. It brings that excess energy to that side. And it almost makes it feel like the other side is getting a massage. And if you just do the side that hurts more first, then it's like hitting your head against the wall sometimes, right? Instead of melting it. So the Alexander technique is really cool. It was developed by an actor who kept losing his voice. And he finally just would watch himself delivering his lines in a mirror. And he noticed every time he did, he kind of extended his head a little bit or cockeyed it. And he realized he was getting misaligned while he was performing. And that's why he kept losing his voice. Well, he ended up observing babies and children and how they moved naturally, in addition to what caused them to start not moving naturally anymore, what started to suppress them. So, for example, he noticed a lot of it started in kindergarten when the teachers would say, sit down and be quiet. And the shoulders would start caving in because the children, it wasn't just about sitting down and sitting still and being quiet. There was something emotional, whether it was shame or sadness or loneliness or even anger, that caused the child's heart to kind of disconnect and feel like there was something wrong with their natural movements. So the technique is about releasing that, which sometimes requires going back to when you were a kid and you had that trigger that caused you to feel like your natural movements were bad. Because obviously, if someone's asking you to sit down and be quiet, it's not because your movements are bad, it's just because they want to discipline you. But that hasn't been, it's not like they're saying, I love you deeply and I accept you deeply. I just want you to stop moving so that I could teach this class, but your movements are still lovable and wonderful. Like the teachers don't say that, but that would be helpful with what we know now. So it's not that your body is moving bad, it's that moving at all was not what was wanted by the teachers. Hey, Kit Kat, you like hearing me read? She's so freaking cute right now. She wants to hold my hand. She's holding my hand. Look, look, Look how cute she is. Oh, I wish I could show you off, but I'm not going to exploit you. You look so comfy. So there's books that you can read about it. There's not a lot of Alexander practitioners here, um, but I was lucky enough to study with one every day that I went to the Marjorie Valentine studio in New York when I studied there for a minute. Um, and yeah. One more thing before I get into the reading is that there's also this, the observation of how a baby turns over is a big part of the Alexander technique, and a lot of like rolling around on the floor, which is really fun and really good for your spine. And I don't think we do that enough. But you see kitty cats doing it all the time. Kitty, 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 kitty. All right, so let's jump into this book over here. Are we going to start from the beginning? Well, on the cover it says, "This book is to be welcomed. It shows the best way of returning to better and more healthy use of our equipment for motion. Mr. Gelb seems to me uniquely qualified to speak with authority." All right. Professor Nicholas Tinbergen said that, the Nobel laureate in medicine and physiology. And by the way, I've got some chai tea brewing that I'm gonna grab in a minute. So where do we want to start? The whole person? That seems like a good chapter. Use and function of the self. Those watching now, you have any opinions on where you want me to start? This is Alexander. Well, his last name this is Mr. Alexander. I think it's Frank. I think that's his first name. So I can read about Alexander. I can read about the operational ideas, use and functioning. Sure, we might as well start with the first chapter after the stuff about Alexander, which I would love to read to you sometime. Also, you can just get the book and read it. I definitely recommend it. So here we go. When an investigation comes to be made, it will be found that every single thing we are doing in the work is exactly what is being done in nature, where the conditions are right, the difference being that we are learning to do it consciously. Alexander developed his ideas over a period of more than 60 years. As his teaching experience grew, he expanded and refined the theoretical framework for his technique. His theories on the corrupting factors in civilization and the evolution of consciousness are instructive, but the main thrust of his work was always practical and down to earth. In effect, there are 7 basic ideas which form the core of his teaching. I have called these operational ideas because they serve as a useful guide to anyone who wishes to apply the technique in daily life. The operational ideas are use and functioning, the whole person, primary control, unreliable sensory appreciation, inhibition, direction, ends and means. Let's consider them all together, one after the other. So basically, each chapter is a different operational idea. And, oh, wait, no, this whole chapter is the operational ideas, chapter 2. So it goes through all of them, I think. Ooh, I found a chakra bookmark. That is so cool. All right. So, why don't you all get cozy, grab some popcorn or a blankie, and I am going to go get my chai tea. I will be right back. Oh, that is so good. Baby. She's so soft. The most valuable knowledge we can possess is of the use and functioning of the self. Hello, Patrick. In the universal constant in living, Alexander begins, few of us hitherto have given consideration to the question of the extent to which we are individually responsible for the ills our flesh is heir to. The question of individual responsibility is at the heart of Alexander's work. He realized that he had never taken responsibility for the direction of his use of himself. Instead of employing his power of choice fully, he had always done what felt right. He had never questioned his unreasoned use until he discovered that certain habits were interfering with his functioning. Then, when he did decide to exercise his power of choice, he came up against the almost overwhelming force of habit. Commenting on this discovery, Walter Carrington wrote, before I read that, do you understand what I mean, that overwhelming force of habit? So, one reason why, okay, so the concept with the Alexander technique is relaxing into a good posture instead of like forcing yourself to have good posture. You literally grow into it and relax into it. And it really is uncanny that we don't do that automatically because we've created habitual movements for our bodies in the 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years that we've been on Earth. And unless we actively unravel those habits daily, 3 times a day, maybe, then it really is striking how we just move in habitual ways. Same with thoughts. And we even say to ourselves, this is just how it is, but it's just our habit. And we can change that. Walter Carrington wrote, Alexander's experiments led him to study processes of the nature of which he knew very little, and indeed of which very little is still known by anybody. Even today, the human organism as a whole is largely unknown territory so far as experimental observation is concerned. I release my right to know who you are. The nature of the relationship between mind and body is still undetermined. The precise relationship between what we call the voluntary and the involuntary aspects of human behavior is still unknown. And although we know a great deal more than was known in Alexander's early days about the structure and functioning of the nervous system, the exact nature of the processes, willing and wishing, of choice and selection of response, of thinking and feeling, and all the other so-called mental processes of which we are subjectively aware is still largely a mystery. It was this realization that led Alexander to choose terms for his descriptive needs that were at once as simple and as non-committal as possible. He saw that the borderline between the voluntary and the involuntary was too blurred to be capable of sharp distinction. So that quote is over, end quote. Yet Alexander found he could make some choices, such as to speak or not to speak. This power of choice allowed him to determine, to a degree, the quality of the actions he chose. He came to understand that his power had much more potential than he was using at that time. His chapter on the evolution of a technique in the use of the self recounts his attempts to take full command of his power to choose. He realized that the choice he made about the use of his organism were fundamental, since they directly affected his functioning and therefore influenced all his other choices. Alexander employed the word use to describe the process of control over all those actions that he seemed to have the potential to control. The concept of use has the same fundamental importance as heredity and environment. Heredity is usually considered to be the factor that sets our potential, environment, the factor that determines the extent to which we actualize it. Use is necessary to complete the picture. Take the cause of a man who drinks, smokes, or eats too much. His problem may result from a complex of hereditary and environmental influences. Eventually, he perceives that his habits are producing unacceptable effects, and he may therefore decide to stop. Although it may seem impossible for him simply to choose not to indulge, the potential for that choice is always there. Help may be sought through hypnosis, pharmaceuticals, psychoanalysis, prayer, or support groups. It is interesting to note, however, that whatever the treatment, the common denominator of successful efforts to overcome destructive habits is the fundamental decision to change. This power to choose, predicted on individual responsibility and integrity, is the core of the concept of use. Alexander called this power of choice man's supreme inheritance. Perceiving that the way in which we use it affects our functioning at all levels. He discovered that he could use himself in different ways, and that some ways were better than others in terms of functioning. We all know that the way we use a tool determines its effectiveness. A chisel used as a screwdriver will not only be inefficient, it will also become damaged. The analogy with the way we use ourselves is limited because the self is such a complex tool. Nevertheless, we do use ourselves for better or worse, consciously or unconsciously, all the time. The effects of faulty use tend to be overlooked. This is because, on the whole, bad use does not have immediate, observable, serious consequences. It is like the continual dripping of water that wears away a stone. I love that analogy. In The Universal Constant in Living, Alexander states, a good manner of use of the self exerts an influence for good upon general functioning, which is not only continuous, but also grows stronger as time goes on, becoming, that is, a constant influence, tending always to raise the standard of functioning and improve the manner of reaction. A bad manner of use, on the other hand, continuously exerts an influence for ill, tending to lower the standard of general functioning, thus becoming a constant influence, tending always to interfere with every functional activity arising from our response to stimuli from within and without of the self, from within and without the self, and harmfully affecting the manner of every reaction. End quote. It is interesting to note that those most frequently seeking Alexander lessons have always been musicians, actors, and dancers whose quality of use directly affects their ability to make a living. Yeah. Board 24/7, what's up? Sweet moments to you. Since use influences different levels of functioning, the physical, emotional, and mental, let us consider the effects of the Alexander technique on this relationship. This separation of the different levels is for purpose of analysis only. In practice, we always use ourselves as a whole. The effect of bad use on our physical condition is the easiest to observe. Doctors have been aware for many years of a range of diseases that often seem not to have organic causes. Examples include the proverbial bad back, headaches, fatigue, and asthma. These are called functional disorders or psychosomatic problems, and doctors generally treat them with a variety of palliative measures. If these do not work, the patient is usually referred to a psychiatrist. All right, we've got a picture here. And under the picture, it says, in both performance and everyday life, the pianist Arthur Rubinstein, or Stein, provides a superb example of poise. He is poised, as opposed to poisonous. How y'all feeling? You got some tea? In his classic study, Body Mechanics, Dr. J.E. Goldthwait presents dramatic photographs of the compression and congestion to which internal organs are exposed as the result of poor body use. They show how the inefficiency with which we use our bodies takes its toll, interfering with breathing and compressing unduly the joints and internal organs. Dr. Wilfred Barlow, a well-known physician and teacher of the Alexander technique, has found that misuse is usually a major factor in both causing and perpetuating rheumatism, backache, arthritis, breathing disorders, hypertension, fatigue, gastrointestinal conditions, headaches, and certain sexual problems. He reports success in treating all these through re-educating his patients by means of the Alexander technique. His treatment is always directed towards use as a whole and not towards a specific symptom. Use as a whole. Barlow also emphasizes the importance of the Alexander technique in replacing the traditional medical orientation towards curing disease with a preventative approach. Preventative. I think, yeah, that's a little bit confusing. Which is the preventative approach? I think he's talking about the Alexander technique. Is that a gem necklace? It is either turquoise or sometimes they stain howlite to look like turquoise. It's like a white stone with a similar black grain. So it was a gift. So I don't know 100% what it is. I guess it could be plastic, but I think it is a gemstone. Many other physicians have recognized the value of the Alexander technique in preventing and treating disease. In a letter written to the British Medical Journal in 1936, 19 prominent British doctors testified that they had observed consistent improvements in patients referred for Alexander lessons, even in cases of chronic disease. They emphasized that misuse was a major factor in causing disease and that diagnoses of a patient therefore remained incomplete unless it took into account the influence of use upon functioning. More recently, Alexander's teaching has received support from Dr. John Diamond, president of the International Academy of Preventative Medicine, Drs. Garlick, Libet, Austin, and Sumner, and from Nicholas Tinbergen. To put it simply, bad body use results in unbalanced coordination. Some parts of the body do too much work, others do too little. A classic example is lifting. Most people tend You okay, baby? To overuse, to overtense their arms, shoulders, and neck, while collapsing their backs and stiffening their legs. It took me a while to unstiff my legs. It's definitely not jade. Tonight, when you brush your teeth, or the next time you pick up a pen to write, observe the way you distribute your energy. Is it really necessary to tense your neck and interfere with your breathing in order to do these things? If you do not notice anything unusual, you should refer to the chapter on unreliable sensory appreciation on page 52. And oh, my kitty, kitty, my kitty, pretty kitty. Ow, my itty bitty kitty. What are you looking at? All this may not seem to be overwhelmingly important, but it is worth bearing in mind the words of the philosopher Herbert Spencer. Each faculty acquires fitness for its function by performing its function. And if its function is performed for it by a substitute agency, none of the required adjustment of nature takes place. I have no idea what accent I'm doing. I'm doing like 10 million at once. But the nature becomes deformed and to fit the artificial arrangements instead of the natural arrangements. Cutie pie, why are you so cute over there? Can I show the people how cute you are? Please? Can I? Hold on. Look at that good stretch, baby. Can I show you? Look. I'm my cute baby. Oh, sorry, that was rude of me. I love you. All right. At least she didn't jump off. She's still right here, but you can't see her. Windshield wipers, windshield wipers, windshield wipers. Bump, bump, bump. Where am I? Over the years, my attempts to refine my own use. No, you can't. Did you see Kitty Cat Mama? That was so cute. Okay, I see you, baby. All right. We're really bonding. She's like scratching her head, and I'm scratching mine. Okay. Why, thank you, Lord 24/7. Very nice of you. Over the years, my attempts to refine my own use have resulted in improvements in both functioning and structure. After my first few Alexander lessons, it became obvious that I was employing artificial arrangements in my movement. For instance, when I bent down, I tended to stiffen my knees and break at the waist instead of using my hip and knee joints properly. At the same time, I found that the stiffening of my knees was causing me to hold my breath. Are y'all breathing out there? And that my lumbar vertebrae were displaced at precisely the point from which I bent. Sounds like he was bent out of shape. Ay, ay, ay. This was just one aspect of a pattern of misuse that not only had a detrimental effect on my functioning, but also distorted my structure. And it was a revelation to discover where my joints really were. Do you know where your joints are? And how they were meant to work in relation to one another. I think the hip bone's connected to the knee bone. Now, my general health and vitality have increased, and I have become completely free of backache and stiff neck. I have gained half an inch in height and greater fullness in my back. And in addition, I experience a growing sense of freedom and a joy of movement in all activities. Those are two words I love. Freedom of movement and joy of movement. Like just enjoying moving your body, even just doing mundane activities. Like a kitty cat, like stretching in the middle of walking. Because she's free to. Nothing's holding her back, right? Improved vitality and health will obviously have positive effects on emotional life. However, the importance of use in emotional functioning goes much deeper than this. Writing about Alexander's work, Aldous Huxley said, if you teach an individual first to be aware of his physical organism and then to use it as it was meant to be used, you can often change his entire attitude to life and cure his neurotic tendencies. So are you saying, Mr. Huxley, or Dr. Huxley, I'm not sure if you're a doctor, that neuroticism can possibly be caused by someone not being aware of their own body and therefore not using it as it was meant to be used? Huxley's statement is based in part on the assumption articulated by Dewey that all of the psychic complexes have their basis in organic discoordinations and tensions with with compensatory flabbiness. That is so interesting. That is so interesting. Like if you feel a lack of motivation, like dancing, whenever I dance, I feel so much more motivated. And I think that's connected to this. The important thing to understand about this last statement is that specific discoordinations and tensions are inseparable parts of a whole pattern. This pattern is the result of two major factors. The first, which was first described by Wilhelm Reich, concerns the relationship of emotional upheaval and trauma, particularly in early childhood, with the formation of energy blocks and character armoring. In other words, our reaction to disturbing events throws our bodies into chronic imbalance. We tend to hold the memory of a traumatic experience in a particular part of the body, like the face. This muscular memory in time becomes part of the total pattern and is incorporated into an individual's use of himself. Failure to take responsibility for one's use assures that the memory remains. In other words, when you do take responsibility for the full use of your body, it pushes those traumas out of the body. Right, Kitty Cat? Right, Kitty Cat? She's distracted. The other factor has been pointed out by Dr. Barlow in the Alexander Principle. He wrote that many habitual postures do not represent an immediate expression of an emotion, but are rather a position from which certain actions and emotions can be possible. In other words, you can come up here. Certain emotions, such as joy or depression, she likes this book, she's rubbing against the book, are only possible. Hello, Mimi. Hey. With certain configurations of musculature. I'm going to say that again. You like this book? Certain emotions, such as joy or depression, are only possible with certain configurations of musculature. You know, they say that doing this, you have to feel joy if you do this. Barlow goes on to say that these configurations do not necessarily start as overtly emotional responses, but, for example, from the way we use our bodies in recurrent work situations. All right, so this is a Barlow quote right here. All right, the office worker, the conveyor belt engineer, the lorry driver, the mom bent over baby. Are you my baby that I'm bending over? Hello, baby. The dentist, the pianist, carry out occupations for so long that they eventually will hold themselves partially contracted even when they're not involved in the actual pressures of their jobs. This residual tension may not be conscious, but eventually it is maintained most of the time. The summation of their various temporary attitudes eventually finds its expression in a posture or in a limited repertoire of postures which come to dominate a person's character in small and at first unobtrusive ways. We become enslaved to our past. Unless you feel your feelings, because there's a bottom in the deepest ocean. Because if you're never free, then you're enslaved by somebody. You got to jump into the water. My work with the Alexander technique has helped me become aware of my repertoire of posture and habit and of the associated emotional patterns. So, for example, a habit that was pointed out to me that I didn't even realize I had in high school was that I tended to pull my sleeves over my hands, just like as a comfort thing. Hello, baby. How are you? And I would, I was actually in acting class, and my teacher was like, that character doesn't do that. Aviva does that. So you need to stop doing that. And so when you do character work and acting, you really have to kind of like undress your habits. All right. I have learned what I do with myself when I am depressed, afraid, nervous, insincere, happy, attentive, and so on. Each of these states has a characteristic postural manifestation. It's so true. So next time you get angry, notice what your body's doing. Next time you get jealous, notice what your body's doing. Next time you get scared, notice what your body's doing. Next time you feel rejected, notice what your body's doing. and then change what your body's doing and see if it changes the feeling. As I have become more familiar with the subtleties of the different patterns, I find myself freer to change stereotyped and immature behavior. These patterns represent one's character. I used to be characterized by a raised chest, tight stomach, set jaw, and hunched shoulders. The classic male defensive aggressive posture. Now, I am free to save this for special occasions, like playing a character. The Alexander technique involves an ever deepening process of discovery and change, a process that works gently but powerfully. Its dynamics have been well expressed by Frank Jones. All right, so here comes a quote by Frank Jones. Now, just in case I'm losing some of you, I do want to tell you, what do you got on you, baby? What is that? I do want to tell you that it's kind of cool, but you'll probably find it really weird. One of the main things that you do when you're taking Alexander technique classes or lessons is to simply sit down and stand up and relearn how to sit and stand over and over and over again until you're doing it with ease and relaxation instead of tension. It's really phenomenal. Okay, Frank Jones said this. The changes I observed in myself were often unexpected, but they were never accompanied by any sudden or violent release of emotion and never left me feeling defenseless. The Alexander technique provides the knowledge and freedom to change, but it is a change within a developmental model. There is no must. Changes take place when you are ready for them and can permit them to happen. Habitual tensions that have grown up over a long time limit development and prevent the free expression of personality. They serve as protection, however, in situations where, rightly or wrongly, a person feels vulnerable or incompetent. The Alexander technique does not deprive one of this character armoring as long as it is needed. Lessons in the technique release an organic process of change that gradually replaces old habits with new habits, which are flexible and can themselves be changed. The process of change is not mindless. It can be directed by intelligence into paths that lead to the best development of the individual's own personality. End quote. So I want to mention something really important. Did you pick up on what you think I might say? The bad habits were not merely undone, they were replaced with different habits. Better for now, but also ever changing to become another habit. So you can simply, instead of like when you wake up in the night, let's say, or first thing in the morning, like when you have to go to the bathroom, instead of just walking to the bathroom mindlessly, go in slow motion, create a new ritual, create a new habit, and then you become more body aware. As one of my colleagues put it, the Alexander technique always uncovers the cracks behind the wallpaper. Let's take that wallpaper down. But it only does so when the person has enough new plaster to refill them. I think the world needs to use this philosophy for actually breaking walls down and putting them back together. Dewey believed that the technique was a method of enlightening the emotions. At the intellectual level, according to Jones, Dewey found it much easier after he had studied the technique to hold a philosophical position calmly once he had taken it, or to change it if, oh my gosh, this is coming off already. Or to change it if new evidence came up warranting a change. He contrasted his own attitude with the rigidity of other academic thinkers who adopt a position early in their career and then use their intellects to defend it indefinitely. Okay, end quote. Dewey believed that the formation and execution of ideas depended on habit. Reason, pure of all influence from prior habit, is fiction. He said, adding that the real opposition is not between reason and habit, but between routine, unintelligent habit and intelligent habit, or art. We must have creative and adaptable habits in order to cope with our complex world. The key function of the intellect is to monitor the effectiveness of habit and determine where changes should be made. It can be compared with the role of a good industrial manager who monitors and directs his subordinates without trying to do their work for them. Intelligence must be balanced with our other functions. In our culture, many individuals live in their heads. Dewey, in his pre-Alexander days, was a prime example. The development of mind-body coordination, which comes through improved use, creates a practical framework in which the intelligence can work. In this way, our intellects can become competent servants rather than incompetent masters. The organization, oh my gosh, that's just, there are so many incompetent masters, it drives me crazy. Mm. Mm. The organization of our physical, emotional, and intellectual functions is extremely complex. The important thing to remember about these three functions is that we do not have a choice about the way we employ them. What do you mean by that? The most fundamental form of misuse is the failure to make choices. I can see that. We can choose to have a choice. Yeah, we can choose to have a choice. One criterion that we must employ in making these choices is the effect they will have on our functioning. One of the goals of the Alexander technique is to create the conditions necessary for natural functioning through a balanced distribution of energy, each part of the system performing its own work in harmony with the rest. This is the true meaning of poise. The body is our instrument for fulfilling our purpose on earth. This instrument can be coarse and dull, or finely tuned and receptive. The choice is ours. Chapter over, checkpoints initiated. How does your use of yourself affect your functioning? How does using your body, vehicle, mind, thought vehicle, how does that affect how you function or don't function? Are you aware of your habits of moving, thinking, and feeling? Try listing 3 habits of body use, thought, or emotion. That is really good point. Like we habitually feel certain things. We habitually think about things in a way. And we can change that habit. We can shift it. We don't have to think like that. Have you ever successfully changed a habit? How did you do it? How did you change your habit? How has your character been influenced by your heredity, your environment, your use? Sleepy time. All right, so we got up to the next part is the whole person. So we're going to stop there. If you want to hear more of this book, please do comment below or right there. And thank you for joining me. I will be teaching Qigong live 1:30 tomorrow, today, I guess later today, Wednesday, 1:30 p.m., not a.m. And yeah, if you have any requests for that class, let me know. If you have explored the Alexander technique before, I'd love to hear more about that. And so, yeah, good night. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. Have a beautiful one. You want to say goodbye, Tiger Lily? She says goodbye. I hope to see y'all soon. Thanks again for stopping by.